I was scrolling through my phone in the hospital waiting room when a nurse approached me with tears in her eyes. She looked exhausted, like she'd been working a double shift, but there was something else in her expression that made me look up from my emails. "She's asking for her daughter," the nurse said, her voice barely above a whisper. I pulled out my earbuds and frowned. "I'm sorry, who?" The nurse, whose badge read Patricia, glanced toward the hallway leading to the patient rooms. "The woman in room 3. She saw you walk past earlier and she's been calling for you ever since. She keeps saying her daughter finally came." My stomach dropped. This had to be some kind of mistake. "I think you've got the wrong person. I'm just here picking up a prescription from the pharmacy. I don't know anyone who's admitted here." Patricia studied my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Green eyes with gold flecks, dark brown hair with natural auburn highlights, a small scar above your left eyebrow from when you fell off your bike at age 7. She paused, watching my face drain of color. "She said you'd be wearing a silver necklace with a compass pendant. Your lucky charm." My hand instinctively went to my neck, fingers finding the familiar pendant my adoptive mother had given me for my 16th birthday. How could she possibly know that? "Please," Patricia said, her professional composure cracking slightly. "She's been here for 3 days. No visitors, no family. But when she saw you this morning, something changed. She became lucid for the first time since she was admitted. She's desperate to see you." "This is insane," I said, standing up and grabbing my purse. "I don't know any patients here. My name is Cassie Brennan. I'm 30 years old. I work in marketing at Preston & Associates downtown. I live in Riverside with my rescue dog. I know exactly who my family is, and none of them are in this hospital right now." Patricia pulled out a small notepad from her pocket. "Cassie Brennan, born March 15th, 1994 at 3:47 a.m. Approximately 7 pounds, 2 ounces. You have a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your right shoulder blade." The waiting room seemed to tilt. Nobody knew about that birthmark except my parents and my ex-boyfriend from college. I hadn't even shown it to the guy I'd been dating for the past 3 months. "Who is this woman?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Her name is Dolores Whitmore. She's 68 years old, terminal pancreatic cancer." Patricia's eyes softened. "She doesn't have long, maybe a few weeks at most. She's convinced you're her daughter." "That's impossible," I said, but my voice was shaking now. "My birth mother died during childbirth. The adoption agency had all the paperwork. My parents, Janet and Frank Brennan, they showed me everything when I turned 18. There was a death certificate." Patricia touched my arm gently. "I've been a nurse for 20 years. I've seen a lot of confused patients, people who mistake strangers for loved ones, but this is different. The way she described you, the details she knows, the look in her eyes when she saw you. Will you at least talk to her? 5 minutes?" I thought about my dad's prescription still waiting at the pharmacy counter. Thought about my mom expecting me home for lunch, probably already setting the table with her good china like she did every Tuesday. Thought about the normalcy of my morning that was crumbling with every word this nurse said. "Room 3?" I heard myself asking. Patricia nodded, relief flooding her features. "I'll take you there." As we walked down that sterile hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, I had no idea that the next hour would shatter everything I believed about my life, my family, and the meaning of truth itself. My name is Cassie Brennan, and I'm about to tell you how I discovered that sometimes the most elaborate lies are wrapped in love, and the most devastating truths come from strangers who know your every secret. The woman in room 3 was about to reveal that my entire life was built on a foundation of deliberate deception. And the worst part? The people who lied to me did it because they loved me too much to tell me the truth. Patricia stopped outside a door marked with the number 3. Through the small window, I could see a frail figure propped up in the hospital bed, connected to various machines. Her eyes fixed on the doorway like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. "She knew you'd come," Patricia whispered. "She said you were always brave, even as a baby. Said you didn't cry when you were born. You just looked around like you were taking everything in." My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. Somewhere in the hospital, an announcement echoed through the speakers. Somewhere, families were getting good news and bad news. Somewhere, my normal life was ending, and I didn't even know it yet. I pushed open the door to room 3. That Tuesday morning had started like any other. I'd woken up at 6:30 to my golden retriever, Baxter, pawing at my face because he needed to go outside. Made my usual protein smoothie while checking emails from clients who apparently never slept. The normalcy of it all seems almost laughable now, knowing what was about to happen. The only reason I was even at St. Mary's Hospital was because my dad, Frank, had forgotten his heart medication after his cardiology appointment the day before. He'd called me at work around 10 a.m., that sheepish tone in his voice he gets when he knows he's messed up. "Cassie, sweetheart, I did something stupid," he'd said, and I could picture him running his hand through his thinning gray hair. "Left my prescription at the hospital pharmacy yesterday. The new blood pressure pills. Your mother's at her book club, and you know how she gets when I interrupt that." I'd laughed, already saving my marketing presentation and grabbing my car keys. The Sacred Tuesday Book Club. God forbid you disturb their discussion of whatever romance novel they're pretending is literature this week. "Be nice to your mother," Frank had chuckled. "She's making that pot roast you love for lunch. Don't be late." The drive to St. Mary's took 20 minutes. I'd made it dozens of times over the years, usually for Dad's appointments. He'd had a minor heart attack 3 years ago. Nothing too serious, but enough to require regular checkups and a pharmacy's worth of medications. Mom worried about him constantly, which is why I didn't mind playing errand girl when needed. The hospital pharmacy was on the first floor past the main waiting area. The moment I walked in, I regretted not bringing a mask. The waiting room was packed with coughing people, crying babies, and that unique hospital smell of disinfectant mixed with misery. The pharmacy line stretched back almost to the entrance. I'd taken a seat in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs, the kind designed to prevent homeless people from sleeping on them, and pulled out my phone. 3 texts from my mom already. "Did you find the pharmacy? Is the line long? The roast will be ready at 12:30, sharp." Janet Brennan was nothing if not punctual. She'd raised me with schedules and lists and color-coded calendars. Everything in our house had a place and a purpose. Even our family photos were arranged chronologically on the walls, documenting my progression from a chubby-cheeked baby to a somewhat successful adult. "You were such a serious baby," Mom always said when looking at those early pictures, "like you were studying the world, trying to figure it all out." I'd inherited her type A personality, or at least absorbed it through proximity. My apartment was just as organized, my life just as scheduled. Marketing manager at a mid-sized firm, yoga on Thursdays, drinks with college friends on Fridays, dinner with my parents every Sunday after church, even though none of us were particularly religious anymore. The adoption had never been a secret in our family. Mom and Dad told me when I was 5, explaining it in simple terms. "Your birth mommy was very young and very sick," Mom had said, holding my hands in hers. "She loved you so much, but she died when you were born. Daddy and I couldn't have babies of our own, so we were blessed to get you." They'd shown me the paperwork when I turned 18, like they'd promised. The adoption certificate from Sacred Heart Adoption Services, dated March 20th, 1994. A death certificate for Jane Doe, my birth mother who'd allegedly died from complications during delivery. No information about my biological father. The case was closed, clean, simple. I'd never felt the urge to dig deeper. Why would I? Janet and Frank were my parents in every way that mattered. They'd been at every school play, every soccer game, every graduation. They'd held me through my first heartbreak, celebrated my college acceptance, helped me move into my first apartment. Family isn't just blood, Dad always said. It's showing up. And they'd shown up every single day of my life. Looking at my phone in that waiting room, I checked the time, 10:47 a.m. The pharmacy line had barely moved. I stood up to stretch my legs, deciding to walk down the hallway just to move around a bit. That's when I'd passed the patient rooms, glancing absently through the small windows as I walked. I didn't notice the woman in room 3 watching me, didn't see her sit bolt upright in her bed, didn't hear her calling for the nurse, her voice cracking with 30 years of suppressed hope. I just walked back to my chair, sat down, and continued scrolling through my phone, unaware that my carefully organized life was about to shatter into a million pieces. Nurse Patricia's words echoed in my head as she led me down the sterile hallway toward room 3. My sneakers squeaked against the polished floor with each step, and I found myself counting the tiles, trying to make sense of what was happening. "She's been here for 3 days," Patricia explained as we walked. "No visitors at all. The emergency contact number she gave us was disconnected. But this morning, when you walked past her door, everything changed." She started crying, saying her daughter had finally come for her. I stopped walking. This has to be a mistake, some kind of confusion from the medication or the cancer. People see things when they're dying, right? They get confused? Patricia turned to face me, her expression serious. "That's what I thought at first. We see it all the time." But then she started describing you. Not just general details, but specific things. She said you'd have a small chickenpox scar on your forehead, hidden by your bangs. She said you bite your lower lip when you're thinking hard about something. Realized I was doing exactly that and immediately stopped. Those are lucky guesses. Lots of people have those habits. "She knew you'd be exactly 5'6", Patricia continued. "She said you'd walk with a slight favor to your right foot from when you broke your ankle in high school. She even knew you'd be wearing blue today because you always wear blue on Tuesdays. Said it was your lucky color." I looked down at my navy blazer, the one I'd grabbed without thinking this morning. My hands were shaking now, and I shoved them into my pockets to hide it. How could she possibly know any of that? "She said she's been watching you from afar for years," Patricia said softly, "following your life through social media, through public records, through anything she could find. She hired private investigators. She said she's your birth mother." "My birth mother is dead," I said firmly, but my voice cracked on the last word. "She died on March 15th, 1994. There's a death certificate." Patricia pulled out her phone and showed me a photo she'd taken of something. It was a hospital bracelet yellowed with age, sealed in a plastic bag. The text was faded but still readable. "Baby girl Whitmore, March 15th, 1994, deceased." "She's kept this for 30 years, Patricia said. "But here's the thing, she has another one too." She swiped to the next photo. Another bracelet identical to the first, except for one detail. "Baby girl Whitmore, March 15th, 1994, adopted." My legs felt weak. That doesn't make sense. Why would there be two? She says the hospital made both, one for the official record, one for the truth. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Mom again. "Where are you?" "The pharmacy shouldn't take this long. Your father is getting antsy about his pills." I stared at the text, at the word mom, and felt something cold spreading through my chest. "What else did she tell you?" Patricia hesitated. "She said she's dying. The cancer has spread everywhere. The doctors gave her 2 weeks, maybe 3. She said she's been searching for you for 30 years and God finally answered her prayers by bringing you here today." "This is insane," I said, starting to back away. "This is some lonely woman creating a fantasy. Maybe she lost a daughter and her mind is filling in the gaps with strangers." "She has photos," Patricia said quietly. "A whole album. Pictures of you at various ages. Your high school graduation, your college campus, your apartment building." The cold feeling turned to ice. "She's been stalking me?" "She calls it watching over you, making sure you were safe and happy." Patricia reached out and gently touched my arm. "I know this is overwhelming, but she's lucid right now, probably for the last time. The cancer has spread to her brain. These moments of clarity are getting rarer. If she really is your birth mother, this might be your only chance to hear her story." I thought about running, just turning around, leaving the hospital, driving home to my parents' house where everything made sense, where my mom would have lunch ready and my dad would tell stupid jokes and we'd all pretend that our perfect family had no secrets. But I also thought about the birthmark on my shoulder, the one nobody knew about, the compass necklace that seemed to burn against my skin, the way Patricia had described me biting my lip, wearing blue on Tuesdays, favoring my right foot. 5 minutes, I heard myself say. "I'll give her 5 minutes." Patricia nodded and led me the final steps to room 3. Through the window, I could see the woman more clearly now, thin, gray-haired, hooked up to multiple machines. But her eyes were alert, fixed on the door, waiting. "Her name is Dolores Whitmore," Patricia said. "She goes by Dolly. She's been asking for someone named Rosemary." "That's not my name," I said. "She says it was supposed to be." Standing outside room 3, I made the decision that would change everything. My hand pressed against the cold metal of the door handle for a moment before I pushed it open. The woman in the bed was smaller than I'd expected, frail and connected to several machines that beeped in steady rhythms. But her eyes were bright and alert, and the moment she saw me, they filled with tears that spilled down her hollow cheeks. "Rosemary," she whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with something that sounded like joy. "My sweet Rosemary, you came." "My name is Cassie," I said, staying near the door, my escape route clear. "Cassie Brennan. I think there's been a mistake." She shook her head slowly, never taking her eyes off me. "I named you Rosemary after my mother, Rose for short, but I know they called you Cassie. I know everything about you, sweetheart. I've been watching you grow up from the shadows for 30 years. The way she said it, with such certainty and tenderness, made my chest tight. I took a step closer, then another, until I was standing beside her bed. Up close, I could see the toll the cancer had taken. Her skin was paper thin, her arms bruised from IV insertions, but her eyes were the same green as mine, with the same gold flecks. "You look just like I did at your age," she said, reaching out a trembling hand. "Before all this." I didn't take her hand. The adoption agency told my parents that my birth mother died during delivery. There's paperwork, a death certificate. Dolly's face crumpled slightly. "I know, that's what they told everyone, but I'm here. I survived, even though sometimes I wished I hadn't." She turned slightly, wincing at the movement, and pulled out a worn envelope from under her pillow. Her fingers shook as she opened it, revealing a collection of documents and photos. The first thing she pulled out was a hospital bracelet in a plastic bag. "This was yours," she said, holding it out to me. "March 15th, 1994, 3:47 a.m., 7 pounds, 2 ounces. You had a full head of dark hair and the tiniest fingers I'd ever seen." I took the bracelet, studying the faded text. It was real, authentic, old. The plastic was yellowed with age, the adhesive long since dried out. "I was 17, Dolly continued, her voice growing stronger. "Unmarried, which mattered back then. My parents were pillars of the community. My father was a church deacon. The shame of having a pregnant teenage daughter would have destroyed their reputation." She pulled out a photo next. It was old, slightly blurry, but it showed a young woman in a hospital bed holding a newborn baby. The woman looked exhausted but was smiling at the camera. She looked exactly like me, or rather, I looked exactly like her. "That's the only photo I have of us together," she said. "A nurse took it when nobody was watching. She felt sorry for me, knew what was about to happen." "What was about to happen?" I asked, finding myself sitting in the chair beside her bed without remembering making the decision to sit. "They were going to take you away. Tell me you died. Tell everyone you died." Dolly's voice broke. "I held you for exactly 43 minutes. I counted every second. Then they came in and said you were having trouble breathing, that they needed to take you to the NICU. I kissed your forehead and told you I loved you. That was the last time I saw you until today." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. "Cassie, this isn't like you. Please let me know you're okay." "How did you find me?" I asked, silencing my phone. Dolly smiled sadly. "I never stopped looking. At first, they told me I was having a breakdown, that I needed to accept your death. They even showed me a death certificate. But I knew, a mother knows. I could feel you out there, alive, breathing, growing up without me." She pulled out another document, this one more recent. "I hired my first private investigator when I turned 25 and had saved enough money. It took him 3 years to find out you'd been adopted through Sacred Heart Adoption Services, another 2 years to narrow down the possible families. But the records were sealed so tight I couldn't get through." "So how did you eventually find me?" "DNA testing websites," she said, small triumph in her voice. "You did one of those ancestry tests 2 years ago for fun, didn't you? So did I. We matched as mother and daughter, but you'd used a nickname in an old college email that you never check anymore." I remembered that test, a Christmas gift from a coworker who was obsessed with genealogy. I'd spit in the tube, sent it off, looked at the results once, then forgotten about it entirely. I've known who you were for 2 years, Dolly admitted, but I was too scared to reach out. What if you hated me? What if you didn't believe me? I kept telling myself I'd do it tomorrow, next month, next year. Then the diagnosis came 3 months ago and suddenly I was out of time. Dolly reached for another envelope, this one sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. Her hands trembled as she opened it, and I noticed she was crying again, silent tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. Before I tell you this next part, she said, I need you to know that everyone involved thought they were doing the right thing. Love makes people do terrible things sometimes, especially when they're desperate. She pulled out a photograph that made my blood run cold. It was my parents, Janet and Frank, standing outside Sacred Heart Adoption Services. But they weren't alone. Standing next to them was a younger version of Dolly, clearly pregnant, her face swollen from crying. That's impossible, I said, snatching the photo from her hand. My parents didn't know my birth mother. Dolly took a deep breath that rattled in her chest. Cassie, Janet isn't just your adoptive mother. She's my older sister. She's your aunt. The room started spinning. I gripped the arms of the chair to steady myself. You're lying. I wish I was, Dolly said softly. Janet is 12 years older than me. She'd been trying to have children for 10 years when I got pregnant at 17. 10 years of treatments, miscarriages, prayers. It was destroying her marriage to Frank. Then I showed up at our parents' house, pregnant and terrified, and suddenly everyone had a solution. She pulled out more photos. Janet and Dolly as children, at Christmas dinners, at graduations, sisters. The resemblance was undeniable once I was looking for it. Our parents arranged everything, Dolly continued. They told everyone I was going to study abroad for a year. I spent the pregnancy hidden in an apartment 2 towns over. Janet visited every week, bringing me groceries, books, checking on the baby. On you. She was there when I went into labor. My phone rang. Mom calling now, not just texting. I declined the call with shaking fingers. The plan was simple, Dolly said. I would give birth, Janet would adopt the baby through the agency to make it legal, and I would disappear, start over somewhere else. They even had a death certificate created for the birth mother to prevent any questions. But they didn't count on one thing. What? My voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't let go. I couldn't just disappear and pretend you never existed. Dolly pulled out a stack of letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Rosemary Whitmore. I wrote to you every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone I could imagine you reaching. Janet promised she'd give them to you when you turned 18, but she never did. I stared at the letters, at my name that wasn't my name, at the proof of a love I never knew existed. She knew you were alive this whole time? She sent me pictures, Dolly admitted, pulling out another album, secretly without Frank knowing. Your first day of kindergarten, your high school graduation, your college acceptance. She'd mail them to a P.O. box I kept just for her letters. No return address, no notes, just the photos. I opened the album with numb fingers. There I was, age 5, missing my front teeth. Age 10, at a piano recital. Age 16, getting my driver's license. Age 22, college graduation. Photos I'd never seen before, taken from distances, some clearly shot without my knowledge. She documented everything for me, Dolly said. It was our agreement. I'd stay away, stay dead, and she'd let me see you grow up through pictures. But then 5 years ago, she stopped sending them. Why? Our parents died in that car accident. You remember? When you were 25? I nodded. My grandparents had died on their way home from their anniversary dinner. It had devastated Mom. They were coming to see me, Dolly said quietly. They'd been diagnosed with cancer, Dad first, then Mom 3 months later. They wanted to make things right before they died. They were going to tell you everything. Janet found out and begged them not to, but they insisted. The accident happened that night on their way back from meeting with me. Are you saying Mom caused the accident? No, Dolly said quickly. It was just horrible timing. Black ice on the road, but Janet blamed me, said I'd killed them by forcing them to travel in bad weather. She cut off all contact. No more pictures, no more updates. Nothing. I stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, life continued normally. Cars pulled in and out of the parking lot. People walked their dogs. The world hadn't ended, just mine. "Frank doesn't know, does he?" I asked, watching a couple walk hand in hand toward the hospital entrance. Number Janet told him the same story everyone else got, that she was adopting her friend's baby, that the birth mother had died. He's a good man. He would never have agreed to this if he'd known the truth. I turned back to face her, this dying woman who was my mother, my aunt's sister, my family's biggest secret. Why now? Why tell me now when you're dying? "Because I spent 30 years being dead to you," Dolly said. "I don't want to actually die without you knowing I loved you every single day. That giving you up wasn't my choice, that I've been fighting to get back to you since the moment they took you from my arms." I drove straight to my parents' house from the hospital, Dolly's album and letters in a bag on my passenger seat. My hands shook the entire drive, and I had to pull over twice just to breathe. When I walked through the front door, Janet was sitting at the kitchen table, her Tuesday book club long over, the pot roast cold on the stove. She took one look at my face and knew. The color drained from her cheeks, and she set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. "You found her," she said. It wasn't a question. "She found me," I corrected. "Your sister, my mother. The woman you've been telling me was dead for 30 years. Frank walked in from the living room, took one look at both of us, and stopped. "What's going on?" I set the photo album on the table, open to the picture of pregnant Dolly standing with them outside the adoption agency. Frank stared at it for a long moment, then sank into a chair. "Janet?" His voice was small, confused. "Who is this?" "My sister," Janet whispered. "Cassie's birth mother." The next hour was brutal. 30 years of lies unraveled in our kitchen while the pot roast congealed on the stove. Janet sobbed as she explained everything, how her parents had orchestrated the whole plan, how desperate she'd been for a child, how she'd convinced herself it was best for everyone. "I loved you from the moment I felt you kick in her belly," she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "I was there for every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound. I watched you grow, and I fell in love with you before you were even born. When they placed you in my arms, you weren't just my sister's baby, you were mine." "But you knew she was alive," I said. "You sent her pictures. You made a deal with her. You let me believe she was dead." "Because I was terrified," Janet admitted. "Terrified that if you knew, you'd choose her, that I'd lose you. And the longer the lie went on, the harder it became to tell the truth. First you were too young to understand, then you were too happy to disrupt, then too much time had passed." Frank hadn't said anything for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. 34 years of marriage, and you never told me." "Dad, you didn't know?" I asked. He shook his head. "I thought we were adopting from a teenage mother who died. That's what your mother told me. That's what all the paperwork said." Janet pulled out a box from the hallway closet, the one she'd always said contained Christmas decorations. Inside were 30 years of birthday letters from Dolly, all unopened, all addressed to Rosemary Whitmore. "I kept them," she said. "I couldn't throw them away, but I couldn't give them to you either. Each one felt like a threat to our family." I spent the next 2 weeks going back and forth between the hospital and my parents' house. Dolly and I talked for hours while she still had the strength. She told me about my biological father, Marcus, a boy from her high school who'd joined the army after graduation and died in Afghanistan, never knowing I existed. She showed me medical histories, family photos, 3 decades of love compressed into days. Janet came to the hospital on day 10. The sisters faced each other for the first time in 5 years. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful forgiveness, just 2 women who'd been destroyed by the same lie sitting on opposite sides of my mother's deathbed. "I'm sorry," Janet said. "I know," Dolly replied. "So am I." Dolly introduced me to my half-brother Trevor via video call. He was 32, lived in Seattle, and had known about me his entire life. His father had married Dolly when she was 25, knowing her story, helping her search for me. He died of a heart attack 3 years ago, never getting to see us reunited. "Mom talked about you every single day." Trevor said through the phone screen. "You were the ghost in our house, but a beloved ghost. I always wanted a sister." Dolly passed on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks and 3 days after we met. I was holding her right hand. Janet was holding her left. The last thing she said was my name. Not Cassie, but Rosemary. The name she'd given me. The name she'd whispered into the dark for 30 years. At her funeral, I met aunts and uncles and cousins I never knew existed. They'd all been told I died at birth. The shock rippled through the family like a stone dropped in still water. Some were angry at being lied to. Others understood the impossible situation. All of them said I looked exactly like Dolly had at my age. Frank moved out for 3 months, needing space to process Janet's betrayal. They're in counseling now, trying to rebuild something from the wreckage. He still calls me every Sunday, still tells his stupid jokes, but there's a sadness in his voice that wasn't there before. I legally changed my name to Cassie Rosemary Brennan Whitmore. It felt like a way to honor both the life I'd lived and the one that had been taken from me. Trevor and I have dinner every Sunday now. He tells me stories about growing up with Dolly, about how she'd set a place for me at every holiday dinner, how she'd buy birthday presents for me every year and donate them to children's charities. I'm in therapy, trying to understand how to love the mother who raised me while grieving the mother who lost me. Some days, I'm angry at Janet for stealing 30 years. Other days, I'm grateful she gave me a beautiful life. Most days, I'm both. The truth is, there were no villains in this story, just people who loved too hard and feared too much. Janet loved me so desperately, she built a prison of lies to keep me. Dolly loved me so fiercely, she spent 30 years trying to break down those walls. And our parents, my grandparents, they loved their daughters enough to orchestrate a deception that would haunt us all. I learned that family isn't just about blood or legal documents or the names on birth certificates. It's about the choices we make and the consequences we live with. It's about Janet checking on me every day since the truth came out, even though I haven't forgiven her yet. It's about Frank teaching me to drive even though I wasn't his biological daughter. It's about Dolly searching for 3 decades and never giving up. It's about Trevor welcoming me with open arms, even though I got the life he should have shared. Sometimes the most profound love comes wrapped in the most devastating lies. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get just enough time to unwrap it all and see the messy, complicated, beautiful truth underneath. That Tuesday morning, I went to pick up a prescription. Instead, I found a mother I never knew I'd lost, a brother I never knew existed, and a truth that shattered and rebuilt my understanding of love itself. Dolly was right when she said I was brave as a baby. Turns out I needed every bit of that courage to face the truth as an adult. The compass necklace Janet gave me for my 16th birthday still hangs around my neck. She said it would always help me find my way home. She was right, just not in the way she intended. It led me to room 3, to Dolly, to the truth. And somehow, through all the pain and revelation, it's leading me back to forgiveness. Because that's what family does. We hurt each other. We lie to protect. We search when we're lost and we find our way back to each other, even if it takes 30 years and a chance encounter in a hospital waiting room. If you found this story meaningful, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your comments mean everything, so let me know your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, raw stories about the complicated truths that make us human. Thank you for listening to my story.